Yeah. My question is to the Minister of Housing and asks, how many people are currently on the State House waiting list?
Honourable Phil Heatley.
I'm advised there are 10,749 people on the waiting list, of which are around 380 are categorised as being in severe housing need, and their waiting time is around 10 days.
Metiria Turei.
Will providing no money for building new state houses in this year's budget reduce the number 10,749 people who are waiting for a home?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Well, actually, the government provides about $650 million on income-related rents, which goes into Housing New Zealand, which they are free to use on accumulating houses, and we are encouraging them to do so.
Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will providing no new money for the building of new state houses increase or decrease the growing inequality in Aotearoa, New Zealand?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure that the net number of state houses has increased since we've been in government, and it's going to continue to increase while we are in government.
Metiria Turei.
How will the effect of slashing funding for state housing in this year's budget impact on the 30% of at-risk and vulnerable young people who are living in unsafe and insecure housing, and the 10% of New Zealanders who live in overcrowded housing?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Mr. Speaker, the member may not be aware, but last year's budget contained the $120 million stimulus package, which was a one-off payment for 18 months to repair state houses which are in serious disrepair and to add new state houses. That $120 million capital injection finishes on the 30th of June. That does not make it a cut in state housing. What that makes it is a stimulus boost during the recession that has now ended.
That's right.
Metiria Turei.
Is the Minister saying that the marginally higher spending last year justifies the gutting of the budget this year, leaving still 10,749 people and their families on the State House waiting list waiting for a home?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Mr. Speaker, if I could direct the member to the budget 3 years ago, which was the budget of the last government, and to Bill English's most recent budget, she will find that operating appropriations have increased by about 30 million and capital receipts by about 65 million. If you take the in-between budget, which is National's budget, yes, there's been a drop, but only because of the $120 million stimulus package.
Metiria Turei.
What budget does the Minister expect that Housing New Zealand will need to slash in order to, as he has said, find the hundreds of millions of dollars for his promised 1,550 state houses he says are going to be built?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Well, I'm not sure how the member comes up with hundreds of millions of dollars for X number of houses. I don't know what she pays for her houses. We occasionally buy houses. We sometimes build houses, and Housing New Zealand leases houses. What I can tell the member is that we're asking Housing New Zealand to make savings like every government department, even though it's a state-owned entity, and we're continuing to make significant appropriations to Housing New Zealand.
Supplementary, Metiria Turei.
When will this Minister fight just as hard for the 10,749 people and their little families on the State House waiting list as he did for his own little family?
The Honourable Phil Heatley. Honourable Phil Heatley.
Mr. Speaker, I'm quite concerned for those on the waiting list, particularly the close to 400 in significant and serious housing need. But equally, myself and John Key and this team were concerned about the 69,000 current tenants, many of whom were living in squalor because the state housing stock had fallen into such disrepair. And most of our capital has gone into that because we care about those who are currently in state houses as well as those on the waiting list.
Question number 11. Oh, my apologies, Moana Maki, supplementary.
Supplementary to the Minister, what advice has he requested about the impact of rises in GST and inflation, as well as predicted rent increases of up to 8% in the private sector on demand for state housing?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
My understanding is Treasury has said expects a 1.5% increase in rentals over the next 3 to 5 years. So I challenge that figure, Mr. Speaker. But I can say that Housing New Zealand has come under increasing pressure to house people during the recession, as you would expect. That may continue, although our Options and Advice Service is seeing a lot more people housed privately or buying their own homes.
Moana Maki.
Supplementary to the Minister. Does he think he has his priorities straight when Housing New Zealand are being asked to, quote, find savings in baselines for much of their operations, unquote, yet on the other hand he has sat idly by while Housing New Zealand have paid consultants $600 an hour to develop an $11 million business case for a computer upgrade that Housing New Zealand's own reports says it doesn't need?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think that the member ought to know that the state housing stock, the state houses are worth $14 billion. Housing New Zealand receives over $1 billion a year in either rents or government subsidies. So spending a few $1 million on a computer IT system and the support that goes around it will keep track of those houses and those tenants. That way we can actually upgrade the stock instead of leaving it to go into serious disrepair.
Question number 11, Sumaru.